No Other Life presents Upstaged. Fatigue. I would assume that it is a pretty universal feeling for a creator that when they're about to make that first statement to the world, they want it to be as representative of the skills that they have developed until that point, of the research they have done until that point, in this case of the thinking they have done up until that point. And they want it to show the best quality as possible. But they're also aware that everybody who doesn't like that first instance may never come back. And there's great anecdote we all have heard in music school about the composer Brahms, who took far longer to write his first symphony than he maybe should or could have, because he felt like he was living in the shadow of another composer, Beethoven. And we don't know if that stalling resulted in a better symphony or a more memorable Brahms. We have no way of knowing that, but one thing we do know is that chances are that delay gave us less Brahms to enjoy today. Maybe that's okay. Suffice it to say, putting out the first podcast episode is a trick because I wanted to make sure that it was a good point that I was trying to make. And I didn't want to choose, necessarily the favorite piece that I've worked on or the one that means the most to me or took the most effort. But then all of a sudden I thought to myself, well, this is a show, and you've been working on a theme song, so why don't we hit that first? And so here we are. And I knew that any series that opens with a episode on fatigue is just going to go straight to the top of the charts, right? So, I could never regret doing this one first. All kidding aside, that is where this came from. When I first got the home that I'm living in, I was decades later to the game than a lot of people in my parents' generations picked up their first home. And I knew that it had been a slow, laborious trial trying to get that far. And I also knew that many people haven't even gotten that far yet. And so there was a lot of emotion wrapped up in it. And one of the things that I had was this beautiful yard, or what I considered to be the most beautiful yard. Really, at that point, it was just a large square of green ground, some of which was grass. But anyway, I was always out there, just pushing things around, trying to build things, using very limited tools that I started with, making a pile of dirt and then moving it elsewhere and then picking up leaves and chopping them up and putting them somewhere else. Now, at this point in time, I was like a bumblebee going from one project to another, back and forth. And at the end of every day, the yard would be littered with scraps of wood and tools and piles of brush, and nothing ever looked different after I cleaned it up. The garage was always a mess, and the yard didn't look appreciably better every time. And I realize now that that wealth of energy that I was putting out was kind of foolhardy, because the yard never really looked that different, but I always knew that I was doing something different to it. Jump forward a few years, and we were living in the pandemic world. So that was, of course, something that gave me a bit more time to do some of these things. But I was also on medication that is a class called dopamine agonist. And a dopamine agonist is a type of drug for Parkinson's that has the side effect of addictive personality. And this can find its way into patients' lives in many ways. The classic ones are eating too much or exercising too much, sexual addiction. These all come into play for many people. And the way that I observed it was that I just kept working out in the yard, just going for it. And this is how I come to the story of the day. I'm not on the same dosage of that medicine anymore, and so I don't really have as many tendencies like that. And in fact, as the disease has progressed and as other things have changed in my life, the least of which, I guess, is that I'm 5 years older now, I have less energy, and I'm constantly plagued by fatigue. So this past winter, probably, 3 months, honestly, later than I would have been doing some of these tasks 6 years ago, I decided that it was a good day out. This is, I think, the week after Christmas. I thought, I better take all that lawn furniture and put it under a tarp and do all the things that you do for winterizing. And even in spite of all the fatigue that I just mentioned, there is a characteristic that is still with me, which is that once I get going, if I keep going, I will keep going. If I take a break, I will collapse. And so what I actually need to do on those days when I have a deadline to get something done, or suppose I had rented a particular power tool that I need to bring back or something like that, I really need to just go for it and kind of abuse myself, no breaks, no nothing. And this is hard because my wife and I want to do a project together maybe, and she'd like to take a break and eat brunch and then take a break and watch a TV show or whatever it is. We're certainly allowed to do that. But I know that if I don't keep going, I will not be able to restart. So I sometimes will sit down for that 22-minute TV show with her, but I find that I get up and walk around and pace and do all sorts of things to try to make sure that my energy doesn't go down. Because once it goes down, it's gone. And so on this particular day, long story short, I was having the fun of working outside because I love it. I really do. And I remember on that day, I put the lawn chairs away and under the table and all that stuff and prepared the fire pit in case we use it over the winter and covered the wood pile for the winter. A lot of stuff, gutters, all these things that you have to do here in the colder climate. And I started to realize that I was losing it. And my dad has this great quote, which I understand so much better now than I did when I was a kid. He says that he stopped doing his yard work for the day because he started to get stupid, or he started to act stupid. And I first learned this when trying to use a circular saw in the dark after I'd worked a full day at work. And all of a sudden, I just realized, oh my goodness, I am this close to doing something stupid and having a pretty bad accident. So that's the first that I noticed that. And now I notice it much more quickly. And I'm glad that I do. I've trained myself to be that way because you don't want to have an accident. So I was packing it up and putting tools away or whatever I had used that day. And I ended up in the garage, and I had been recently recording in there for the series No Other Life. And that day I'd been playing music on the speakers outside through my computer. So right there, as I walked in very tired, I had a computer, I had a microphone, and I had a recording open that I had created, a few days earlier. That I was just playing around with the piano, and I think probably a new sound library that I hadn't used before. I don't remember exactly all the parameters, but for whatever reason, I just got up to the microphone and started kind of just exhaling. And that over time became the melody, if you can call it that, of the theme of this podcast. And it was kind of fun because it started to sound to me like some kind of quasi-orthodox choir music, which reminded me of when I was performing that type of music back in college. And I just loved this Russian liturgy where there would be a group in the choir called the octavists, and these guys were able to sing an octave below all the people that were traditional basses. And so I got to tinker with some of that, and there's really very few places in the literature where you can really explore those low notes. We're talking C's, B flat, A. I mean, this was exciting for someone who was just growing up in the choral world. And so this experience kind of made me think of that. And later on, a few weeks later, I was trying to think of something that I could use for the theme song of this podcast. And I came back to that in mind. And I thought, this is going to be like reflections. People often reflect and meditate when they hear choral music, and this is kind of repetitive. And so I added those Tibetan singing bowl at the beginning, and some breathing in and out. So all of these things that are evocative of various cultures' meditation, but completely aware of their pseudo-ness. There's nothing real here. No authentic combining of things that should go together. It's really a melange, but kind of fun. And in case, I'm thinking of you guys, there's a good chance that you don't want to hear this music every time. So once you see that this podcast has come on, you can go +30 if you wish, and you'll be right into the title and the content. I'm looking out for you, friends. So that is the story of the theme that you're about to hear, and I hope you'll enjoy it, or something. Anyway, please, friends, learn who you are, think of who you are, and become a better you. You have no other life. That was, in its entirety, the official theme song of the Upstaged podcast. If you intend to keep hearing this in a shortened form as many times as possible, please do subscribe to this Upstaged feed. Or you can head over to rickseahome.com for the latest news, archived social media, or to purchase any of the music you hear on this podcast. Both Upstaged and the No Other Life project are independently conceived of and managed by me, Rick Seahome, ad-free and without interruption for all listeners. I appreciate all your support. Please subscribe, leave a review, and spread the word. They say it's the #1 way to keep this going. Friends, you have no other life, and it's the grandest improv session of them all. Own what you bring to the scene and share it with all of us.